Look at her face. You see this? This is what brilliance looks like once it's finally in the right hands.
Poor thing. Should have read the fine print.
Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll make sure the world knows who perfected it. You already
Still
have.
trying to sound noble.
Look at her, he laughed, arm wrapped around his mistress. She could never create anything on her own. She's nothing without me. They mocked her in public, humiliated her in private, and celebrated as if the world already belonged to them, flaunting the stolen invention she built with sleepless nights and bleeding hope. She stood there quietly, the woman they called useless, the genius they dismissed as lucky, the mind they tried to bury beneath betrayal. But what they didn't know was that while they were busy stealing her work, she was securing something far greater. While they were laughing at her, she was moving in silence. While they believed they had destroyed her future, she was already building an empire they couldn't even imagine. And the day her truth surfaced, their laughter died. Because nothing is more terrifying than the woman you underestimated rising with everything you thought you stole. This is the story of the downfall they never saw coming, and the victory she planned long before the betrayal began. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we dive in, I have a favor that means the world. Hit that subscribe button. Every click isn't just a number. It's a spark that keeps these stories alive, voices heard, and shared truths that might otherwise go unnoticed. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Because together, we're not just sharing stories. We're building a community, spreading hope, and proving that every voice matters. Don't just watch, be part of something bigger. Emily used to believe that love softened people. She thought marriage made you safer, protected, held. When she married Daniel, she imagined a future where they worked side by side, encouraged each other, and grew into something bigger than they could be alone. In the early days, he made her feel chosen, special, like her ideas mattered and her dreams were worth chasing. It was easy to fall for a man who looked at you like you were the brightest thing in the room. But the truth came in small pieces, little drops that didn't burn at first. A correction here, a sigh there, a joke made in front of friends that didn't quite feel like a joke. Emily learned slowly, too slowly. She didn't realize until years later that Daniel's kindness in public only existed to make his cruelty at home look justified. Emily is brilliant, he would tell co-workers at dinners, smiling proudly while he shook hands. Honestly, she's the smartest person I know. She just needs a little guidance sometimes. She gets lost in the details. People would laugh politely, and Daniel would laugh the loudest. Emily learned to smile small so he wouldn't accuse her of overreacting. But once they were alone, the air changed. "What was that answer you gave about your work?" he snapped one evening after a dinner party. "Did you even listen to the question? You rambled like you always do." "I didn't ramble," she said softly. "Yes, you did. And you embarrassed me. Again." She felt her chest tighten the way it always did when he used that word. Embarrassed. As if she was a stain on his shirt instead of his wife. The next morning, he acted normal. He always did. He made coffee, asked if she wanted toast, and kissed her cheek before she left for work. Anyone watching would think he adored her. He knew when to be gentle, when to be caring, and when to turn it on for an audience. At home, though, the smallest things set him off. "Why are you wearing that dress?" he asked one afternoon as she got ready for a company event. "It looks cheap." "It's the one you bought me," she said, trying to keep her tone light. He scoffed. "Don't get smart with me. Go change. I'm not going out with you looking like that." She changed. He didn't even look at her before leaving the house. Years passed like that. Quiet cuts, sharp edges, comments that made her second-guess everything she did. She became careful with her words and cautious with her excitement. She apologized for things that weren't her fault. She tried harder to make him happy, even though nothing ever did. The only place she still felt like herself was the small home office she carved out in the corner of the house. That was where Pulse Core lived. It started as an idea she scribbled in a notebook during graduate school, something she believed could change medicine if she could ever get it right. A diagnostic system that could detect diseases early, adjust treatments in real time, and save lives long before the world even knew they were in danger. She poured years into it. She gave it her late nights, her early mornings, her heartbreak, and her hope. But she didn't tell Daniel everything about it anymore. Not after he started mocking her work. "You're wasting your time," he said one night, watching her scroll through data. "You're chasing something no one cares about. Leave innovation to people who actually innovate." "I am innovating," she whispered. He didn't hear her. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Eventually, she learned to hide her progress. She saved files behind encrypted passwords. She wrote in coded shorthand. She backed everything up on drives she kept inside her purse, because Daniel had developed a habit of checking her research. "What are you hiding from me?" he asked once as he leaned over her shoulder. "Nothing. I'm just organizing." "Well, don't lock things behind passwords. That's suspicious. It's sensitive work." "Sensitive to who?" "You're not a government agent. Stop acting dramatic." He said it like she was a child pretending to be someone she wasn't. The more excited she became about PulseCore, the angrier he grew. "Why are you always at the lab?" he asked one night when she came home late. "Who are you trying to impress?" "No one. I'm trying to finish a milestone." "Oh, please." He waved her off. "You think working late makes you important. It doesn't. You think people notice you, but they don't." "That's not why I'm working," she said quietly. "Then why are you coming home at 10? Are you seeing someone?" "Of course not." "Then knock it off. You're married. Act like it." She tried to explain her progress, hoping he might be proud. But the more she tried, the more he twisted her words until she ended up apologizing again. Then the changes started. Daniel bought new suits, not one or two, a whole new closet. He started going to the gym, taking long showers before leaving the house, using a cologne she'd never seen. He brushed off her questions with vague answers. "It's for work. Don't make it weird." He started guarding his phone, locking it with a thumbprint, pulling it away every time she walked by. He brushed his hair differently, spent more time shaving, more time checking his reflection. One night, Emily found a bright smear of lipstick on his shirt collar as she sorted laundry. Not her shade, not her brand. She held the shirt in her hands for a long time, hoping there was a harmless explanation. There wasn't. When she approached him, he didn't look nervous. He didn't stutter. He didn't even flinch. He laughed. "Relax," he said, snatching the shirt from her. "It's just lipstick." "Whose?" she asked. "Why does it matter? If you weren't so busy pretending to be a scientist, maybe you'd keep your husband." The words hit her like a slap. Her breath caught. He didn't apologize. He didn't take it back. He tossed the shirt into a hamper and walked away like nothing had happened. She felt something in her chest crack that night. Something small and important. But she didn't leave. She wasn't ready to leave. She still believed things could get better, that he might change, that she could fix what felt broken inside their home. She tried to be patient, calm, agreeable, but the distance grew wider, not smaller. A few weeks later, she noticed the same lipstick mark again, this time on a tie. The smell of a different perfume on his jacket, the same one she'd smelled once on a hostess at a restaurant. A woman Daniel had stared at for too long. He didn't hide it well. He didn't want to. Every night Emily worked on PulseCore, he came home colder than the night before. He accused her of ignoring him, of disrespecting him, of taking him for granted, even while he disappeared for hours working late. He blamed her for every argument and twisted her words into reasons he needed someone else to feel wanted. And still, somehow, she kept working. PulseCore grew. Her research became more advanced. She made breakthrough after breakthrough, but Daniel took every win as an insult. One night when she came home later than usual, he was sitting on the couch watching TV. He didn't greet her, didn't ask about her day. "Who were you with?" he asked, eyes still on the screen. "I was at the lab." "For 8 hours?" "Yes," he chuckled. "You know you're not the only one with needs, right? You can't expect me to sit here waiting for you every night. I'm not asking you to wait. I'm asking you to trust me." He finally turned toward her. "Trust? You? Emily, you can barely keep your emotions under control. Why would I trust you with anything important?" She felt that one deep. It sat in her chest long after she went to bed. And then came the day everything shifted again. Emily got off work early because the lab had an electrical issue. She didn't text Daniel. She didn't want to interrupt whatever he might be doing. She parked in the driveway, feeling exhausted but proud. She had finally solved a problem she'd been stuck on for months. She walked inside quietly, expecting the house to feel empty, but she heard voices coming from the living room. A woman's voice. Soft. Familiar. She moved closer. Then she froze. Daniel was sitting on the couch beside a woman with long dark hair and a smile that cut through Emily like a blade. Veronica, Daniel's co-worker, the woman who always laughed too loudly at his jokes, the one he claimed barely talked to him. They weren't touching, but they were close, too close, and on the coffee table in front of them was Emily's open laptop. Her heart dropped. She stepped into the room. "What are you doing with my computer?" Daniel looked up, calm as ever. "You're home early. That's my work. Why are you looking at it?" "I needed to see what you've been hiding from me." "I'm not hiding." "You are," he cut in. "And you expect me not to worry? You lock things. You password everything. You act suspicious." "I'm protecting my research." Veronica leaned back, crossing her legs. "It's a little strange to hide things from your husband, don't you think?" Emily wanted to scream. "This is private." Daniel smirked. "Not anymore." That was the moment Emily realized something was happening behind her back. Something bigger than lipstick and late nights. Something she couldn't name yet, but she felt it rise like cold water around her ankles. She backed away from them because she didn't trust her own voice. She didn't know that this was only the beginning. Emily barely slept that night. She lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the house, feeling the weight of something shifting, something she didn't have the strength to stop. She kept replaying the image of Daniel and Veronica sitting on the couch with her laptop open between them. He didn't even try to hide it. He didn't even look ashamed. That was the part that stayed with her. The ease, the confidence, as if he already believed whatever he wanted was his. By morning, she felt hollow, numb enough to function. She walked through the house on shaky legs, trying to remind herself to breathe. She made coffee, though she wasn't thirsty. She stood by the counter because her body didn't know where else to go. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked softly. But something felt wrong. Daniel was unusually cheerful when he walked into the kitchen. Too cheerful. "Good morning," he said, kissing the top of her head like nothing had happened. "You're up early." Emily watched him pour his coffee. Her voice came out thin. "Where were you last night?" He didn't look at her. "Working?" "You were with her." He paused mid-stir, then shrugged. "And? You're acting dramatic again. You know how sensitive you get." She flinched. He always said it like that, like her pain was a performance. "I saw you reading my research," she whispered. "It needed to be read," he said calmly. "You're playing in a field you don't understand. Someone has to check your work. It wasn't your place." "It's all our place," and he said. "We're married. Partnership, remember?" Emily wanted to argue, but something inside her felt too bruised to push back. She wasn't afraid of Daniel physically, but she feared the way he twisted things. The way he made lies feel like truth, and truth feel like an overreaction. She feared the way he could make her feel small with one sentence. She gathered her belongings, trying to find her strength in the act. "I'm going to the lab." He smiled again, that smile she hated. "Why? So you can hide things some more?" "I'm going to work." "Emily," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice, "if you want people to take you seriously, really seriously, you need to stop acting like a secretive child. Look at me." She didn't. He nudged her chin with 2 fingers until her eyes met his. "No one respects a woman who hides things from her husband." Her breath trembled. "I'm not hiding anything from you." "You are," he said plainly, "and it's pathetic." She felt the burn behind her eyes before she could stop it. She blinked fast so he wouldn't see tears. He kissed her forehead as if she was a startled child. "Calm down. We'll talk later." She left the house as fast as she could, gripping her bag like it was the only real thing she had left. At work, she couldn't focus. Her hands shook when she typed. Her thoughts scattered each time she tried to review a file. Her co-workers asked if she was okay, but she forced a smile and lied until they stopped asking. She stayed late, not because she needed to, but because she didn't want to go home. When she returned that night, the house was dark except for a single lamp in the hallway. Daniel wasn't in the living room. He wasn't in the kitchen. She checked the bedroom and found it empty. For a moment, she felt relieved. Then she heard a sudden burst of laughter from downstairs. A woman's laughter. Her heartbeat jumped. She walked down the stairs slowly, every step heavier than the last. When she reached the living room doorway, she saw them. Daniel and Veronica sitting close on the couch, talking casually like they were the couple, and Emily was the intruder. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the coffee table. A pair of earrings that weren't hers sparkled under the lamp. Daniel didn't stand. He didn't apologize. He didn't even seem surprised to see her. "You're home," he said, lifting his glass. "Good. We were talking about you." "Talking about me?" Emily whispered. Veronica smiled, that same smug little tilt of her lips. "We were going through your notes again. It's interesting stuff." Emily's stomach dropped. "My notes?" Daniel nodded and tapped the laptop in his lap. Her laptop. "I told you, we're a partnership. You shouldn't keep secrets." Emily stepped forward, but Daniel closed the computer with a slow, confident click. He stood up and took a step toward her, smiling like he was doing her a favor. "You didn't think you could actually pull this off without me, right?" "Pull what off?" she breathed. "Pulse core," he said simply. "A breakthrough this big needs the right face, the right mind, the right leader. You aren't ready for that kind of responsibility." Emily swallowed hard. "It's my work," he smiled wider. "Not anymore." The room spun. She felt the air leave her lungs. For a moment she thought she might collapse. She didn't. She just stood there, frozen in place, hands shaking at her sides. Daniel slipped an arm around Veronica's waist. "You should get some rest," he said. "You're emotional. You get things twisted when you're emotional." She didn't reply. Her voice was gone. She went upstairs and shut the door gently because she didn't want them to hear how badly she was breaking. She cried quietly into her pillow, tears soaking through the fabric until it felt heavy beneath her cheek. She tried to calm her breathing. She tried to slow her thoughts. But every sound from downstairs reminded her she wasn't alone in her own home. She didn't remember falling asleep. She only remembered waking up. The sun was barely rising when her eyes opened. Her head pounded. Her throat felt raw. For a moment she didn't move. She let the morning light settle on her face and told herself everything she saw last night might have been a nightmare. But when she finally pushed herself out of bed and walked toward her office, the truth hit her like cold rain. Her laptop was gone. Her notebooks were gone. Her hard drives, gone. Her sketches, the printed diagrams she had pinned to her corkboard, the sticky notes filled with formulas and reminders, her encrypted USB drive she kept hidden inside a box at the back of her drawer. All gone. Her chest tightened so hard she had to hold the door frame to steady herself. She searched the room anyway, opening drawers, checking behind stacks of books, kneeling on the floor to look under furniture. Nothing. Her heart pounded as she walked quickly into the hallway, then downstairs. She checked the kitchen table, the counters, the living room, the couch cushions. Nothing. Her breath came fast and shaky as she looked around the empty space. Then Daniel's phone vibrated on the counter. Emily didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up right in front of her face. A message from Veronica. Everything transferred. "He's ready. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting subscribe. Every story we share is a spark of hope, giving a voice, a future, and a chance to children and women who have faced abuse all over the world. Support us by subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you never miss a story that truly matters. And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from and how this story touched you. Together, we're not just watching stories unfold. We're keeping hope alive." Emily thought the worst had already happened when she saw the message on Daniel's phone. She thought nothing could feel heavier than waking up to find her life's work stolen by the man who promised to protect her. But the next 48 hours would show her that Daniel had much bigger plans for her humiliation. He wasn't finished hurting her. He was only getting started. She spent the morning searching for anything she might have missed, any file he might have overlooked, any scribbled note she could save. But the office shelves were bare. Her laptop was gone. Her devices were missing. Every trace of pulse core had been scrubbed from her home like it never existed. Daniel had taken everything that mattered to her, and he had done it with ease. When he finally walked into the kitchen, he didn't look tense. He didn't look guilty. He looked excited, energized. His smile stretched too wide, like he was proud of himself. "Morning," he said, reaching for the coffee maker. "Rough night?" She stared at him, unable to speak. He hummed softly as he poured his coffee, completely unfazed. "I need you to get dressed," he said casually. "There's an event today. Big announcement." "What announcement?" she whispered. He lifted his mug and tapped it against the counter. "Pulse Core, we're going public." Emily felt the breath knocked out of her. "What?" Much bigger plans for her humiliation. He wasn't finished hurting her. He was only getting started. She spent the morning searching for anything she might have missed, any file he might have overlooked, any scribbled note she could save. But the office shelves were bare. Her laptop was gone. Her devices were missing. Every trace of Pulse Core had been scrubbed from her home like it never existed. Daniel had taken everything that mattered to her, and he had done it with ease. When he finally walked into the kitchen, he didn't look tense. He didn't look guilty. He looked excited, energized. His smile stretched too wide, like he was proud of himself. "Morning," he said, reaching for the coffee maker. "Rough night?" She stared at him, unable to speak. He hummed softly as he poured his coffee, completely unfazed. "I need you to get dressed," he said casually. "There's an event today. Big announcement." "What announcement?" she whispered. He lifted his mug and tapped it against the counter. "Pulse Core. We're going public." Emily felt the breath knocked out of her. "What?" "I scheduled a press conference," he said, like he was announcing a dinner reservation. "Investors, partners, media, everyone who matters." "You're going to announce my work as yours?" Her voice cracked. Daniel took a slow sip of coffee, his eyes cold over the rim of the cup. "You need to drop this my work nonsense. It sounds delusional." He set the mug down and leaned against the counter. "You were never going to lead something like this. You don't have the presence, or the confidence, or the connections. I do." Emily felt the room tilt a little. "Daniel, you stole everything." "I streamlined it," he corrected. "You made a mess. I packaged it into something real." "It was real when I built it." He waved her off. "Don't start crying. You always ruin things when you get emotional." She stared at him, stunned by how ordinary he made the betrayal sound. "Get ready," he repeated. "I want you present. It'll look good for the cameras. Shows we're united." "We're not united," he gave a short laugh. "It's not about us. It's about optics. You'll smile, you'll clap, and you'll do your little supportive wife thing. After that, you can go home." She didn't move. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said. "When PulseCore goes live, everything changes. Our lifestyle changes. Our status changes. Just cooperate." Our. The word punched her in the stomach. Nothing about this was ours anymore. Emily didn't know how she ended up in the car with him an hour later, dressed in a simple blouse and skirt she barely remembered putting on. She felt like she was floating beside her own body, watching everything happen from far away. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel and one on his phone, smiling down at messages she couldn't see. She didn't need to. She already knew who he was texting. When they arrived at the convention center, the parking lot was packed. News vans lined the street. Lights flashed. People hurried around with equipment and badges. A huge banner hung above the entrance. Pulse Core, the future of predictive medicine. Her stomach twisted. "You did this fast," she whispered. Daniel adjusted his tie, still smiling. "I've been preparing for months." Months. He had been planning to steal her work long before last night. Long before Veronica. Long before everything fell apart. "You planned this," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "Of course I planned it," he said, stepping out of the car. "Success doesn't happen by accident." Emily sat frozen for a moment before forcing herself to follow him. She kept her head down, avoiding the cameras. Reporters rushed toward them, shouting questions. Daniel basked in the attention, waving gracefully like a celebrity. Inside, the main hall buzzed with excitement. Investors filled the seats. Scientists from other firms whispered to each other. The stage glowed under bright lights, and in the center stood a sleek podium with Daniel's name on it. Not hers. Daniel walked up the steps with smooth confidence, soaking in every cheer, every flash, every whisper of admiration. Emily took a seat in the back row, her hands trembling in her lap. She didn't want to be there. She didn't want to watch. But Daniel had insisted she show her face. "You'll seem unstable if you don't," he'd said earlier. She felt sick. When the announcer introduced him as the visionary mind behind PulseCore, the audience erupted in applause. Emily's throat tightened so much she could barely swallow. Daniel approached the podium and gave a warm, charming laugh into the microphone. Thank you, everyone. Today is the day I share something that will change lives across the world." Emily pressed her nails into her palms to stop herself from shaking. The words coming from his mouth were hers. The concepts, the timeline, the milestones. Every sentence he spoke belonged to her. Hearing him twist them into his own story felt like being skinned alive. He talked about the nights he stayed awake perfecting the algorithms. He talked about struggling to push past failures. He talked about his team, though she knew he never built a thing. The audience nodded, impressed. They clapped. They murmured things like brilliant and revolutionary. Emily felt like she was drowning in the sound. Then the Q&A began. A reporter stood. "Daniel, was anyone else involved in the early development stages?" Daniel smiled, that polished public smile that made strangers believe he was a good man. "My wife tried to help, but she can't even keep our Wi-Fi working." The audience laughed. "I love her, but this kind of innovation requires a different level of expertise." Emily's chest burned. The humiliation wasn't quiet. It wasn't private. It was loud, sharp, and public. Another reporter asked, "Is your wife here today?" Daniel nodded and pointed carelessly to the back. "Somewhere back there, probably lost. She gets overwhelmed in big crowds." Cameras swiveled toward her. She instinctively lowered her head, but flashes still exploded in her face. A few people chuckled. Veronica, sitting in the front row, looked over her shoulder and smirked directly at Emily. Then she slid her hand along Daniel's arm, leaning into him like she belonged there. Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek before she could stop it. Someone whispered in the row behind her, "Is that the wife? The unstable one from the statement?" She stiffened. "What statement?" another whispered. "You didn't see it?" Daniel's PR team said she's dealing with emotional issues and might try to disrupt things. They asked the press to be sensitive. Emily inhaled sharply. Her heart thudded in her ears. Daniel's words, his lies, his version of her spreading out into the world like smoke she couldn't gather back. By the end of the conference, she couldn't feel her hands anymore. She just sat there, still as stone, while Daniel posed for photos with investors, shaking hands and laughing like he had just saved humanity. Veronica stood at his side, smiling proudly as though she helped build the thing she only learned about last night. Emily slipped out while they were distracted. She didn't want to wait for Daniel. She didn't want to sit in the car with him. She called a cab with shaking fingers and headed home alone. But going home didn't bring comfort. Daniel arrived an hour later, energized from fame. He tossed his jacket onto the couch and walked straight into the kitchen where she stood. "Why did you leave early?" he asked. "That looked bad." "I couldn't stay," she whispered. "Well, you should have. You're embarrassing yourself." "You humiliated me." He sighed loudly. "There you go again. Everything is about your feelings. Do you think anyone cared about you in that room? This is business." Her voice rose despite her fear. "This is theft." Daniel stepped closer until his face hovered inches from hers. "It's only theft if you can prove it, and you can't because I took everything you had." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. He walked to his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. He slapped them onto the counter. "Sign these." She looked down. Divorce papers. "I'm done babysitting you," he said coldly, "and so is everyone else." Her hand shook as she picked up the page. "You're divorcing me?" "Yes, and you're going to leave the house today. I already had the locks changed." He pointed toward the stairs. "Pack a suitcase, just one. That's all you're taking." Just then, footsteps echoed down the stairs. Emily turned. Veronica stood there, wearing Emily's robe. Emily felt the room spin. Veronica walked up to Daniel with a lazy smile and placed a set of keys into his hand. "Here," she said softly, "the house keys. I took them from her drawer since you don't trust her anymore." Daniel kissed Veronica's cheek. Thanks, sweetheart. Emily's lungs burned. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a moment of weakness. They had been planning this together, and she was completely alone. Emily stared at the keys in Daniel's hand, the metal glinting under the kitchen light like a cruel joke. Those were her keys. Keys to her home, to her life, to the place she once believed was safe. Now they sat in Veronica's palm like trophies. Veronica leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder and smiled at Emily with lazy triumph, as if she had already won something Emily didn't even know she was fighting for. Emily couldn't speak. Her throat had closed so tightly that air barely moved through it. She felt dizzy, but she swallowed and forced herself to stand straighter. She refused to give them the satisfaction of watching her collapse. Daniel didn't care about that. He cleared his throat with the impatience of a man waiting on a slow clerk. "I said pack your things," he reminded her. "Don't drag this out." Emily looked at him, her voice small but steady. "You're throwing me out? After everything?" He gave a fake, sympathetic smile. "You need help, Emily, and I'm done trying to fix you. You're unstable. You saw what happened at the conference. You couldn't even behave for the cameras." "I behave better than you," she whispered. He ignored that. "Don't make me call someone to escort you out. You know I will." Veronica giggled softly. "You should go pack. You're making this awkward." Emily's heart cracked again, but she walked to the stairs on shaking legs, refusing to let them see her break. Each step felt heavy, as if her body carried a weight she hadn't earned. When she reached the bedroom, she closed the door behind her and pressed her hand against it, breathing hard. She stared at the room she had once tried to decorate with quiet joy. Soft blankets, gentle colors, framed memories. Now the space felt like it belonged to strangers. Her suitcase sat at the foot of the bed, dusty from lack of use. She pulled it out and unzipped it, her hands trembling. She packed clothes without really looking at them. Just grabbed things: shirts, jeans, a sweater she loved, a scarf she'd worn on a happier trip. She tossed them all in because she didn't have the strength to fold them. She could barely see through her tears anyway. Every few minutes, her chest tightened like it wanted to force a sob out of her. But Emily refused. She would not give Daniel even that piece of her. She breathed slowly, swallowing the broken sounds that tried to rise from her throat. When she looked up, her eyes landed on her desk. Her research used to sit there. Her notebooks, her hard drives, the sketches of PulseCore's early design. Everything had its place. Now the surface was completely bare. She clenched the edge of the desk until her knuckles went white. It felt like she was staring at the outline of her own missing life. She zipped the suitcase shut, wiped her face, and lifted it. The wheels thumped against each step as she dragged it downstairs. Each sound echoed louder than it should have, like the house was listening. Daniel and Veronica waited at the bottom. Veronica wore Emily's robe as if she had lived there for years, leaning lightly into Daniel's side. He looked bored, tapping his foot. "Finally," he said. "I thought you'd try to pull something dramatic." Emily didn't answer. She stepped around them, suitcase rolling behind her. She felt like she was walking underwater, every movement slow and heavy. When she reached the front door, Daniel's voice stopped her. "Hold on." She turned, her stomach twisting. He picked up a large envelope from the table and tossed it toward her. It landed at her feet. "Sign those by tomorrow," he said. "My lawyer will be in touch. Don't delay this. I'm giving you a clean exit." "A clean exit?" she repeated softly. Daniel shrugged. "I could drag your name through the mud if I wanted, but I won't, as long as you don't make trouble." Veronica whispered something in his ear. Daniel smirked. Emily felt her heart squeeze painfully. "Daniel," she said, trying one last time to find the man she once loved. "Why are you doing this?" His face flattened. "Because I'm tired of pretending you're something you're not. I'm tired of carrying you. I'm tired of your imaginary genius act. You bring nothing to this marriage anymore." Her lips parted in disbelief. "I gave you everything." "You gave me headaches," he snapped. "Now go." Emily had no voice left. She stepped outside. What she didn't expect were the cameras. 3 reporters and a cameraman stood at the bottom of the driveway. Microphones angled toward her like weapons. Lights flashed before she could even shield her eyes. "Emily!" one of them shouted. "Sources say you're being removed from the home. Is it true?" Another chimed in. "Is it because of your emotional instability, Daniel's team says you've become a liability. Emily froze. Her entire body went cold. Instability. Liability. Daniel had given them talking points. He stepped onto the porch behind her, his voice suddenly warm, sad, and incredibly fake. Please don't upset her, he told the reporters, making his voice tremble slightly. She's been struggling. This is hard for her. Emily spun around. That's not true. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Keep arguing and I'll have you escorted off the property. Then he lifted his head to the cameras and spoke loud enough for the world to hear. She had nothing to do with Pulse Corps, he announced. She can barely manage herself. Veronica laughed softly beside him, so quiet that only Emily caught it. Emily felt something collapse inside. She thought she had already hit the bottom of the fall, but this moment carved a new low, a deeper one, a darker one. She could hear reporters whispering to each other, could hear shutters clicking, could hear the beginning of a story she had no power to stop. She dragged her suitcase down the driveway, her heartbeat pounding in her ears like a drum she couldn't silence. When she reached the sidewalk, the reporters tried to follow, but she waved them off weakly. Please, just leave me alone. They didn't. Cameras still clicked. Someone shouted another question, but she kept walking until she reached the curb and sat down, too exhausted to move further. Her suitcase stood beside her like a silent witness to everything she had lost. For a long moment, she simply sat there, staring at the ground, feeling the weight of the world pressed down on her shoulders. Her hands shook. Her breath stuttered. Her eyes burned but wouldn't release more tears. She didn't know how long she sat like that. Minutes, hours. Time didn't mean anything. Cars passed. People stared. No one stopped. Her phone buzzed. Emily blinked, confused, wiped her eyes and pulled it from her bag with slow fingers. She expected another reporter, or maybe one of Daniel's stage, concerned friends. But the number was unknown, and the message was short. I know the truth. Meet me tonight. Come alone. Emily stared at the text message on her phone long after the screen dimmed. The words felt unreal, like something out of a movie someone else was living. She read them again and again until she could say them in her head without looking. I know the truth. Meet me tonight. Come alone. For a moment she wondered if Daniel sent it as a trap, but the tone wasn't his. Daniel didn't hide behind mystery. He attacked openly. He tore her down standing face to face. Whoever sent this message wanted something different. She waited on the curb until the sky grew darker, the evening breeze brushing her skin with a chill she didn't have the strength to fight. When her phone buzzed again, she flinched, expecting another message. But it was just the low battery warning. She sighed, wiped her eyes, and forced herself to stand. She didn't know where she would go later, but she knew she had to follow the message. Whatever truth this person claimed to have, she needed it. She needed something, anything, to help her fight back or at least understand what Daniel had done. Emily walked for a few blocks until she reached a small cafe with dim, warm lighting and a quiet corner inside. She plugged her phone in and waited, staring at her reflection in the dark window. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Red eyes, pale cheeks, lips pressed tight like she was holding the last pieces of herself together. When night fell, she followed the instructions in the second text. Behind the old train station, black sedan, doors unlocked. It sounded reckless. It sounded dangerous. But staying silent felt worse. She found the car parked under a broken streetlight. The back door was open, just like the message promised. Emily hesitated, gripping her bag tight, then slid inside. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something floral. A woman sat on the opposite seat, her face partially hidden under a hood. When she looked up, the hood fell back, revealing sharp brown eyes and a tired but confident expression. "You're Emily," the woman said. Not a question, a statement. Emily nodded. "Who are you?" "Grace. I used to work for Daniel." Emily's breath caught. She didn't speak. She just watched the woman's face, looking for trickery, but all she saw was someone used to handling secrets. Grace took a slow breath. "He hired me 2 years ago. At the time, I thought I was working for a decent guy. He said he needed a private investigator to keep an eye on competitors and check security risks. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic." Emily swallowed and whispered, "But it wasn't true." "No, Grace said softly. It wasn't. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. I started noticing things he wasn't telling me. He gave me access to your emails, your work files, even your calendar. Every time you made progress on PulseCore, he would send me instructions to collect your data. Emily shook her head slowly. He's been spying on me? More than spying, Grace said. He's been copying everything, backing it up under his own name, sending parts of your work to investors behind your back. He's been preparing to claim PulseCore for a long time. Emily leaned back, pressing a hand over her mouth before she could stop herself. Her breath came quick and sharp. He said he only started paying attention recently, after the invention worked. Grace's eyes softened. He lied. He's been watching you build it piece by piece. When you hit a breakthrough, he told people he guided you. When you hit a setback, he said you cracked under pressure. Emily felt the words like bruises blooming inside her. Why are you telling me this now? Why help me? Grace waited quietly. When Emily finally lowered her hands, Grace opened the folder and turned it toward her. These are documents and files I saved when I realized what he was doing. I couldn't let myself become part of something dirty. She flipped through pages of data transfers, fake signatures, stolen files, emails from Daniel bragging about reclaiming the PulseCore project from a wife who doesn't know what she's doing. Each line felt like a blade. Emily whispered, "He said he was protecting me." Grace shook her head. "He was preparing to bury you." Emily stared at the folder, stunned. A strange feeling spread through her chest, not exactly anger, not exactly pain. Something sharper, something alive, something she didn't recognize at first. Resolve. For the first time since Daniel ripped PulseCore away from her, Emily felt her feet planted firmly on the ground. She breathed deeper, straighter, stronger. "What do I do now?" she whispered. Grace held her gaze. "You rebuild. But you rebuild smarter than he thinks you can. You find people he can't manipulate, people who still believe in ethics. You show them your mind wasn't the weak one in that house, it was his." She leaned closer. "And you make your own version of PulseCore, one he can't corrupt." Emily blinked. "You think I can?" Grace smiled, small but confident. "Oh, I know you can. I've read your notes. I've studied your designs. You're better than Daniel ever was. He just convinced you that you weren't." A long breath slipped out of Emily, shaky but steady enough to hold on to. "I don't have anything left," she said quietly. "He took everything." Grace reached into her bag again and pulled out a slim silver drive. "Not everything." She placed it in Emily's hand. "This is a backup of your earliest drafts and the improvements you made last spring. It's not complete, but it's enough to rebuild from." Emily stared at the drive as if it were a living thing, her fingers curled tightly around it. Grace continued, "I also contacted someone who can help you. Investor, ethical, sharp. They turned down Daniel because they didn't trust him. They'll trust you." Emily blinked. "Why?" Grace's voice softened. "Because they care about the work, not the ego." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt the warmth of hope return to her chest. It wasn't loud, it wasn't bright, but it was real, glowing quietly like the earliest spark of fire. A small smile touched her lips. "What about Veronica?" she asked. The name tasted bitter. Grace's expression tightened. "She'll stay with him until he stops giving her what she wants. It won't take long. Men like Daniel always need a new audience." Emily looked down at her hands. "He used me. For years. That's what men like him do." Grace paused. "But they always slip. And when he slips, you'll be ready." Emily wasn't used to being believed. Not in years. The feeling hit her deep, like someone had reached into her chest and straightened her spine for her. She nodded slowly. "I want to fight back," she whispered. Grace's smile widened. "Good, because the truth is bigger than PulseCore." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Grace reached forward and opened another folder. "Daniel didn't just steal your work. He covered up failed tests. He bribed 2 reviewers for positive results. And he used investor money to hide the data, not improve it." She tapped a page. "PulseCore isn't ready for the public. It's dangerous in this form." Emily felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. He launched something unsafe? He rushed it because he wanted credit, Grace said. He didn't care who got hurt. Emily's heart pounded harder. She felt fear, but something else too. Anger, sharp, clean, focused. She whispered, "Then I really do have to rebuild." "Yes," Grace said, "because the world deserves the real version, the safe version, the one you created." Emily closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, she felt different. Not healed, but no longer broken. "What's the next step?" she asked. Grace leaned back with a tired smile. "First, I introduce you to someone who can help fund your comeback." Emily nodded slowly. She was no longer reacting. She was planning. Part 1 ends here. When you are ready, I will write Part 2 ending with, "Pulse Core fails international safety review. Global recall recommended." Daniel sweating on TV. Emily whispering, "It starts." Emily didn't know what she expected when Grace led her to the quiet brick building on the edge of the city. It didn't look like a place where powerful decisions happened. It looked like a forgotten office with no sign and no guard, the kind of place people walked past without noticing. That made her feel safer. Daniel would never look for her somewhere this plain. Inside, the building opened up into a modern workspace with soft lighting, glass walls, and rows of bookshelves filled with thick volumes on biotech, ethics, and research law. Emily paused at the doorway, unsure if she belonged in a place like this anymore. She felt like someone who had been dragged through a storm and dropped inside a clean room. Grace placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're fine. Come on." They walked to a small conference room. A woman stood waiting inside. Tall, sharp eyes, clean black suit. She didn't smile easily, but when she looked at Emily, something in her expression softened just enough to show she wasn't unfriendly. "This is Harper," Grace said. "She's the investor I told you about." Emily offered a nervous handshake. "Hi, thank you for meeting me." Harper's grip was firm. "I've heard about your work," she said. "Daniel tried to pitch his version twice. I turned him down both times." Emily blinked. "Why?" "I don't invest in people who only care about being first," Harper said simply, "and I don't support people who steal credit." He acted like PulseCore was a toy he wanted to show off. He didn't have a real understanding of the science behind it. Emily let out a slow breath. Someone could tell. Someone saw through him. Harper motioned for them to sit. "Grace showed me your early drafts and your notes. You built something incredible. Raw but brilliant. And more importantly, ethical." Emily lowered her eyes. "He stole everything. I have nothing left." "You have your mind," Harper said, "and you still have the core idea. That's more than what he has. He has stolen pieces. You have the actual vision." Emily felt something warm grow in her chest again. Not hope exactly, but maybe the beginning of hope. Harper leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "Tell me this, Emily. If you had the chance to rebuild PulseCore the right way, safer, stronger, improved with everything you've learned, could you do it?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I could. It would take time, but I could." "No," Harper corrected gently. "You can, not could. You can." She slid a folder across the table. "This outlines the funding I'm prepared to give you. Equipment, lab space, a private team of experts handpicked for ethical work." Emily stared at the folder without touching it. "Why would you invest in me? You barely know me." Harper's expression softened a little. "I don't need to know everything about you to know your work is real. I've spent my career reading people. You're not a liar, and you're not unstable, no matter what Daniel says." Hearing those words made Emily inhale sharply. Someone believed her without hesitation. Someone saw her as more than Daniel's version of her. Harper continued, "You'll need to rebuild quietly. Daniel would sabotage you if he found out, but he's too distracted with his launch to notice someone beating him at his own game." Emily nodded slowly. "I want to start. I want to fix what he corrupted." Grace smiled beside her. "Then it's time." That night, Emily stepped into the small but polished laboratory Harper had secured for her. The moment she saw the white counters and new equipment, all spotless and waiting, she felt her chest tighten with something she hadn't felt in a long time. purpose. She placed the silver drive Grace had given her onto the workbench. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just stared at it, remembering the nights she sat in her old office at home, building PulseCore with quiet faith while Daniel slept or yelled or mocked. That version of her had been lonely and tired, but she had been strong, stronger than she ever realized. She plugged in the drive and watched as her old notes filled the screen. Not everything was there, but enough. Enough to start, enough to breathe life back into her work. She whispered to herself, "I'm still here," and she got to work. Days passed, then weeks. Emily worked from early morning to late night, building a new PulseCore design from the pieces she still had. Grace checked in daily, bringing coffee and updates about Daniel's growing arrogance. Harper visited twice a week, offering suggestions and quietly cheering Emily on with simple nods and measured encouragement. Emily wasn't the same woman who cried on the curb. She had changed. There was a firmness in her voice now, a steadiness in her movements, a quiet fire behind her eyes that no one had put there. She had found it herself. But outside her small new world, Daniel's life began to shift in ways she didn't expect. It started with whispers Grace brought from contacts inside Daniel's team. "He's under pressure," Grace said one evening. "Investors want fast results. He promised a breakthrough timeline he can't meet." Emily didn't smile, but she didn't feel pity either. That version of PulseCore was unstable. He ignored the data. Grace nodded. "Exactly. Now he's scrambling." As Daniel's stress rose, he grew harsher with the people around him. And Veronica, the woman who once gloated at the top of the staircase, finally felt the same cold breath Emily had lived with for years. Grace told her one afternoon, "Veronica contacted someone I know. She's scared. Daniel has started snapping." "Emily?" a trembling voice whispered. Emily froze. "Veronica?" There was a shaky breath on the other end. I need to talk to you." Emily's jaw tightened. "Why would I listen to anything you say?" "Because Daniel isn't who you think he is," Veronica said quickly. "He's worse, and you're not safe." Emily almost hung up, but something in Veronica's voice, a trembling honesty, held her still. Veronica continued, "He drained your shared accounts. He took money you didn't even know he had access to. He told me he plans to declare you mentally unfit in court. He said he can win because he knows all your weak points." He laughed when he said it. Emily felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. "Why tell me this now?" A long pause. Then Veronica whispered the truth. "Because he's cheating on me too. I saw him yesterday, with someone else, and he didn't even bother to hide it." Emily exhaled slowly. The irony stung like salt on a wound. Veronica swallowed hard. "He's going to discard me just like he discarded you. He'll ruin me, and I can't let that happen." Emily didn't want to feel sympathy. She tried not to, but she understood too well what it felt like to be used and thrown away. Still, she kept her voice guarded. "What do you want?" "I have proof," Veronica whispered. "Screenshots, bank records, audio clips, things he doesn't know I saved. Meet me tomorrow. I'll give them to you." Emily didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Fine, but only in a public place." "Okay," Veronica breathed. "Thank you." When the call ended, Emily set the phone down and stared at the wall. A strange stillness settled over her. Something powerful, something steady. She no longer felt like the broken woman on the driveway. She felt stronger than she ever had. That night, after hours of work, Emily turned on a small monitor in the lab to check the news. She expected to see more praise for Daniel, more interviews he staged, more lies. Instead, the headline flashed in bold red letters. PulseCore fails international safety review. Global recall recommended. Emily froze. She turned up the volume. A reporter's voice filled the room. "The PulseCore system, marketed as a breakthrough by Daniel Carter, has been flagged for major safety concerns. Several countries have halted distribution until further investigation is complete." The screen cut to Daniel at a podium. He was sweating, his smile tight, his eyes frantic as he tried to spin the news. Emily stood slowly. Her heart beat once, hard, like it was waking up. She watched him stumble over answers, watched the panic sneak into his voice, watched the perfect public facade start to crack. Quietly, calmly, she whispered to herself, "It starts." Emily woke before sunrise on the day everything changed. She didn't plan to. Her body just knew. She sat up slowly, letting the quiet fill her chest like a deep breath. The world outside was gray, still, waiting for something new. She rubbed her eyes and looked around the small apartment she had been renting since Daniel threw her out. It wasn't much, a tiny space with plain walls and secondhand furniture. But it was hers. Nothing in it belonged to him. Nothing in it carried his fingerprints or his voice. Today was the day she reclaimed her name. Grace arrived early, knocking softly before stepping inside with 2 coffees in hand. Her hair was pulled back, and her expression was calm but firm. She didn't need to say anything. Emily understood the look. Today wasn't about fear. Today was about truth. "You ready?" Grace asked, handing her a cup. Emily nodded. "Yes." Harper met them downstairs beside a black SUV, leaning against the door with a clipboard tucked under her arm. She looked composed as always, but there was an intensity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Something like pride, something like expectation. "Everything is in place," Harper said. "The report has been delivered. Investigators are moving in this morning." Emily swallowed. "How long will it take?" "Not long," Harper answered. "When corruption is deep, it collapses fast." As they drove across the city, Emily looked out the window at the buildings rolling past. Every street felt different today, sharper, brighter, like the world had tilted and the angle was suddenly better. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't someone hiding from a man who claimed her brilliance as his own. She was a woman stepping out from the shadows. When they reached the block of Daniel's company, everything already buzzed with tension. Government vehicles lined the street. Agents in suits stood at the entrance, badges out, faces focused. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, shouting questions at anyone who walked by. Camera lights flashed wildly. Grace parked the SUV 1 block away. Emily watched from the tinted window as swarms of people gathered, waiting for the moment the raid officially began. It came fast. Agents moved through the front doors with crisp authority. Employees stumbled back in confusion. Some tried to run, only to be stopped by other agents waiting at the exits. Investigators carried boxes, scanners, sealed envelopes. A lead officer stepped forward and announced loudly, "Daniel Carter, we have a warrant to search the premises for evidence of fraud, data theft, medical falsification, and financial misconduct." The crowd exploded with questions. Microphones shot forward. Cameras zoomed in. People shouted Daniel's name like sharks tasting blood. Emily didn't watch with revenge in her heart. She watched with clarity, with justice, with the quiet strength of someone who finally saw her truth becoming louder than his lies. Then Daniel appeared. He pushed through the crowd, his tie crooked, hair messy, eyes wild. He looked like a man who slept in his office, who had run out of excuses, who had finally hit the wall he thought he was smart enough to avoid. "What is this?" he yelled at the agents. "You can't just walk in here. You have no right." "We do," the lead officer stated calmly. "Step aside." Daniel turned, searching for cameras, searching for Veronica, searching for help anywhere. Panic scraped across his face. Emily stepped out of the SUV. Grace reached toward her. "Are you sure you want to be seen yet?" "Yes," Emily said quietly. "The truth should have a face." She walked closer, the wind blowing her hair back, the noise of reporters rising around her. People noticed her instantly. Phones turned, cameras swiveled. Daniel froze. Emily stood 10 feet away, calm, steady, grounded. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just met his eyes. For the first time since she'd known him, Daniel looked afraid of her. Not because she was threatening him, not because she was screaming, but because she was standing tall. The one thing he never believed she had the strength to do. He pushed through the crowd toward her, voice cracking with desperation. "Emily, talk to them. Tell them this is a mistake. You owe me that much." "I owe you nothing," she said softly. The words hit him harder than a slap. His mouth opened, searching for something to say. but nothing came out. Agents surrounded him again. "Mr. Carter, step back." Daniel's voice cracked. "Emily, stop this. You're ruining everything." "I didn't ruin anything," she said, her expression calm and steady. "You did." The officers continued the raid as Daniel stumbled backward, face pale. Veronica appeared near the entrance next, makeup smeared, hair unbrushed. She looked shaken, scared, unsure whether to stand with Daniel or run. Daniel didn't even look at her. His world was falling, and he still didn't realize she wasn't going to catch him. Grace touched Emily's arm gently. "It's time." Emily nodded, because this was only the beginning. She still had to step into the spotlight. They drove across the city to a large media hall Harper rented for the morning. When they arrived, the building was already crowded. Word had spread. Reporters gathered in anticipation. Investors waited in their seats. Scientists murmured quietly, whispers turning into speculation. Emily walked through the hallway like she had walked through it her entire life. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't afraid. She felt calm, clear, ready. Grace adjusted her blazer. Harper smoothed her hair behind her ear. Emily stepped onto the stage, the lights warm against her skin. Cameras clicked instantly, flashes filling the room like sparks. She moved to the podium, and the room fell silent. Emily had never been the loudest person in the room. She didn't need to be. Her silence held weight. Her presence held truth. "Good morning," she began gently. "My name is Emily Carter, and I am here to share the truth about PulseCore." People leaned forward. Pens hovered over notepads. Hands tightened on cameras. She continued, her voice steady. "For the last 3 years, I have been the sole creator, designer, and developer behind the PulseCore medical system. I built it from a notebook idea into a functioning technology. I worked days, nights, weekends, alone in a home office that no one believed in except me." Her throat tightened, but she breathed through it. She wasn't telling this story for sympathy. She was telling it to reclaim what had always been hers. "My work was stolen," she said simply, "and presented as someone else's accomplishment." The audience erupted with whispers, then hushed again as she held up her hand. "I have brought proof of authorship, data logs, development files, recorded timestamps, signed statements from colleagues who witnessed my early drafts, and communications showing the deliberate theft of my intellectual property." She lifted the folder Harper prepared. She didn't need to raise her voice. The evidence spoke louder than any anger could. "And today," she said, "I am launching my new company. Independent, ethical, transparent, built from scratch with investors who believe in real science, not shortcuts and corruption." Gasps filled the room. She clicked a button, revealing a screen behind her with the new logo. Astrolab, a clean, sharp design, her design. "And alongside it," Emily said, her voice rising just a little, "I am unveiling the real version of PulseCore, the advanced version, the safe version, the version I finished in private long before the prototype was stolen." The crowd buzzed like electricity, energy moving through the room in waves. She paused, then delivered the blow Daniel never saw coming. "The version Daniel stole was outdated, a prototype I abandoned a year ago. He didn't steal my invention. He stole my trash." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Investors gasped. Scientists exchanged looks of shock and respect. Emily stood in the center of it all, unmoved, calm, letting the truth wash over the room and settle into every corner. Now the world knew, and Daniel's world began to collapse. Back at his company, investors gathered in hallways screaming at legal teams. Phones rang endlessly. Veronica, shaking, walked into an interview room and told investigators everything she knew. All of it. Ruth, Daniel's mother, arrived pale and trembling, asked for a private room, and quietly handed over a small recorder. "Emily was the only one who ever tried to help him," Ruth whispered. "And I covered his lies. But I won't do it anymore." The investigators pressed record, and Daniel's last line of protection disappeared. Somewhere in the chaos, Daniel learned the board froze his accounts. He learned that charges were being prepared. He learned investors were suing him. He learned his mother had turned him in. He learned Veronica had betrayed him. He lost everyone. Hours later, the police finally led him into holding, and Emily was waiting. She stepped into the room quietly. Daniel looked up from the bench, eyes red, face gray with exhaustion and disbelief. "Emily," he whispered, voice breaking, "please, help me. You don't understand. They're twisting everything. You always trusted me. You have to talk to them. You can't let this happen." She stepped closer, her expression calm and unreadable. "Emily," he begged, reaching for her. "Please, I'm begging you." She looked at him for a long moment, then said with quiet strength, "I didn't rise to destroy you. I rose because you kept trying to bury me." She turned and walked away as reporters outside chanted her name.